Webinar is titled Service Animals and EMS: What Our Textbooks Don't Contain, presented by Rob Ravndal. I'm going to pass it over to Rob now. Rob, thank you so much for being here with us today to share your knowledge and experience with us, and we look forward to the presentation.
Thank you, Rio. First, I want to thank everybody that's on this webinar. Service animals and EMS and how to navigate a call for service when your patient has a service animal is one thing that I never learned in my career. And really, it wasn't until I got a service animal that I found out what I should have done. And it made me realize that had I run a call with a service animal, odds were very high that I would have done the wrong thing. So this was really centered around helping good people to know what the right thing to do is, and also to help you guys that are educators and trainers and things for your departments or institutions, just so that you can start to formulate a context by which you can start this conversation with students and as well as your employees that you're training. So, um, so brief introduction. I mean, service animals and their access rights, they are not taught in EMS initial education, at least on a national basis. They're not taught on even on continuing education basis. My qualifications to speak on this issue are that I'll kind of go through it, but anyway, I retired from the field as a paramedic. I'm currently a paramedic program director, and I used a service animal. And it wasn't until the injuries that required my retirement, basically, is how I got the service animal. And so that's when I was like, oh my goodness, we have a huge hole here. A little bit about me. The Obviously most people like to see the dog, so that's why the headshot with the dog in there. His name's Carnes. But in 1991, I became an EMT. 1993, I became a paramedic. I apologize for those pictures overlapping there, but I worked for Alachua County Fire Rescue in Gainesville, Florida, Campbell County Memorial Hospital EMS in Gillette, Wyoming, and I retired from Lincoln Fire Rescue in 2018 in Lincoln, Nebraska. Currently, I'm the program director and instructor at Southeast Community College in Lincoln, Nebraska. A little bit about my education. If you're sitting on this webinar and you are under the age of, oh, I would say 45 and you have a degree, well, hey, you beat me. You're ahead of the game where I was. So it wasn't until 2008 I got an associate's degree from Casper College in fire science. And then long after my retirement, I completed my bachelor's degree from Bellevue University in history, 2001, and master's in 2024 from University of Nebraska Kearney. And most of my historical education centers around disenfranchised groups in history, civil rights. It's a lot about, okay, well, what's the history of where we are today? How did we get here, and what does that look like? And then currently I'm working on a PhD in educational studies at University of Nebraska Lincoln, where a lot of my research is kind of centering around service animals and healthcare, service animals and EMS. A couple fun facts about me. First thing, I'm a husband and a father, like to fish and camp. And for fun, as odd as it is I like to study civil rights history. Retired from the field due to PTSD acquired on the job. I know in the field we talk sometimes about cumulative. For me, I have to say it was one incident. So it doesn't mean I didn't have stress from other incidents, but I'm just saying that one incident was the one that caused my retirement. My service dog Carnes, he mitigates my PTSD symptoms, and he likes to fish as much as I do, as you can see him in the picture there. And I advocate for first responder mental health as well as disability rights. Couple of ground rules. Ask questions. You can ask anything you like. And I put in here, seriously, you cannot offend me. And really how we're going to get society to move forward on this issue is through us having communication and conversations. If my service dog Carnes happens to bark or climbs up on me during the webinar, don't be alarmed. He's just doing his job, and he's just doing his task work. One thing I put in here is a quote from Jonathan Haidt. Really enjoy his writings and stuff and his perspectives. And also a little snippet for anybody that when we talk about, this isn't really about PTSD, but we have to talk about it in our in our occupation if we're going to change the trends. And PTSD is a normal reaction to extreme trauma, just as bleeding is a normal reaction to being stabbed. So anyway, a little bit of my dry humor. So the objectives of this are very simple. It's know the what the Americans with Disabilities Act, how they define a service animal, what questions you can ask to determine if an animal is or is not a service animal, determine when and how EMS providers should and should not accommodate a service animal, and to help you kind of get some guidelines on starting to develop curriculum to include service animal education into your lesson plans that you already have. And that's something I really want to stress here. Service animal education doesn't have to be its own weird little standalone microcosm. People with service animals, they fall and they have tib fib fractures, they have MIs, they have strokes, they have diabetic emergencies, they have seizures, they're in car accidents, they have the same thing happen to them that happens to the rest of the general public. Um, so the ADA, surprisingly, the ADA is actually written in rather elementary language, um, but and you can find more resources at ada.gov. But the ADA defines a service animal as specifically, service animals are defined as dogs that are individually trained to do work or perform tasks for people with disabilities. That's a big thing that separates service animals from therapy animals and emotional support animals is it has to be a dog, although there are exceptions for miniature horses, and the animal has to be trained to specifically do tasks that mitigate the disability for the person that they're working for. Um, the generally Title II and Title III of the ADA, those apply to most of where EMS is going to live. Into those apply to entities. Pardon me a moment. Sorry, I got tongue tied. Title II and Title III specifically states entities must permit service animals to accompany people with disabilities in all areas where the general public are allowed to go. Title II entities are state and local government entities, courthouses, libraries, public libraries and schools and so forth. Title III entities are businesses and nonprofits that are open to the public. So with EMS, we may have, we're going to have a lot that fall in Title II, and there's some that are going to fall in Title III that are maybe private companies or something of that sort. So specifically, once again, service animals are dogs that specifically perform tasks or do work for a person with a disability. In this picture, we have what is pretty obvious. This is a guide dog, and it looks like it's leading someone with vision impairment. So, what are work or tasks? Tasks are actual work. So examples are alerting, deep pressure therapy, guarding during a seizure, guide work, etc. Providing companionship is not a task or work. And at the same time, I really want to go back to guarding during a seizure. That doesn't mean like physical protection guarding. That means more like the animal is trained to ensure that the person is in a safe location during the seizure. A lot of times those dogs will alert the person before the seizure happens so they can lay down. And then the dog will basically put itself between itself and any objects the person might hit. And so that's kind of what they're talking about with guarding. The dogs will also stay with the person, and as the person comes into the postictal state and comes out, they'll help to orient the person and ground them, so to speak. And then once they do get up off, it's time for them to get up, the dog will actually brace and provide physical support for them. Something that's worth noting here is you might come across a 3-unit team. So some disabled persons can't handle their own service dog due to their age or their disability. This is going to be most common with children, and they may have a third team member that acts as the dog's handler for the disabled. The dog still performs tasks or mitigates the disability, and they are covered by the ADA. The ADA does not say who the handler has to be, but it does say that the service dog must have a handler. And so that's where the third person teams, 3 unit teams come into play. So the big one is this is huge in society. There's just so much misunderstanding. There's a lot of really good people out there that just are not informed properly, and this is such an issue. This isn't specific to our industry. This is just people in general. And since most industries are full of people, those people take their preconceived notions and whatnot with them into their industry, whether it's something like the hotel industry, entertainment industry, healthcare, EMS, first response, you name it, it's there. So when it's not obvious that a service animal, when it is not obvious what service an animal provides, only limited inquiries are allowed. Staff, now notice this staff. So like for example, if I'm shopping in a store as a patron, I'm not staff, so it's not my responsibility to go around and ask people about their service dogs. So staff may ask 2 questions. Is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? And what work or tasks has the dog been trained to perform? Staff cannot ask about the person's disability. They cannot require medical documentation. They cannot require a special identification card or training documents for the dog, or ask that the dog demonstrate its ability to perform the work or task. Um, in addition, service dogs are not required to wear vests or other identifying garments like tags, leashes, collars, etc. Part of the reason for that is that some people, their disability and the work the dog needs to do, a vest or cape might actually hinder that. Another thing to be aware of, especially if you're in a part of the country maybe that it gets really hot, is that, if you can imagine being on a beach, public beach, even having a cape on the dog, it holds in body heat, so it might cause the dog to overheat faster. And in addition, if you think about it, especially with the beach, like if you've been to a beach and you've ever gotten sand on you and then you put a t-shirt on, how that chafes your skin and rubs it and whatever. Well, the same thing happens to the dog. So the vests are absolutely not required by the law. So why does it matter if you ask the questions? If it's a service animal, the ADA gives immunity from liability to the entities that are permitting a service animal to enter. So that's a big reason to ask. So an example would be that, let's just say, for example, that I have a medical emergency. EMS crew responds to me. They ask the 2 questions the ADA permits, and then in transit, my dog bites one of the providers or something. Now, if it's a pet, there's no federal law protections for taking pets in ambulances. There's no requirements they have to be allowed in ambulances. And so therefore, depending upon the state law and whatever, the liability may reside with the ambulance company. In a case, because it's a federal requirement to accept a service animal and to give them access, then as long as they've been in good faith, there's every indication this is a service animal, then that liability lies with the animal handler. Since it's federal law, it does trump any state law that might run counter. The other one is that it shows the handler the law. So it's a subliminal message. I love going in, and I've talked to other service animal handlers as well. We love being asked the ADA questions because it tells us that the entity cares enough that they've trained their staff, they've trained their people what to do, and it shows respect for service animal teams that you took the time to learn. So a couple of key points. Service animals are dogs and sometimes miniature horses. They have specific access rights to public buildings and businesses. Um, Service animals by the ADA are actually considered a medical device. And in fact, because it's a medical device, they're a medical expenditure. Now, ironically, most insurance companies do not cover any expenses for a service animal, But health savings accounts, a lot of flex spending accounts, the IRS, they consider them to be taxed. They consider them medical expenses, and so therefore they can be taken care of as such. Um, the the work or task performed by a service animal is to mitigate a disability for the person that they're there working for. And emotional support animals and therapy dogs do not have access rights under the ADA because they are not actually service animals. So, emotional support animals, and this is kind of where the um, where some of the misunderstandings come into play. So emotional support animal or comfort, they provide comfort, emotional support through their presence. An emotional support animal can be any kind of animal. ESAs do not have access rights in public buildings and businesses. And what I like to say is think of an ESA emotional support animal is it's a buddy, and it's a buddy to a specific person, and maybe that person does have a disability, and maybe that animal is, does do something for them, but they don't do something for them in this physical sense if they do not perform work or task. And they are not a service animal. So if, a business is welcome to accept emotional support animals if they want to. However, there's no federal requirement that they do so. There's no law saying that they do so, at least on the federal level. Therapy dogs. A lot of times you'll see these in schools and you'll see them in hospitals and so forth. These dogs are amazing. They have a very important task, but they're not service animals. They are well trained usually. They're well behaved. But they're there. They're the way I term them is they're everyone's buddy. They play an important role, but they're not granted access by the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Rob, we do have one question
Sure thing.
from Brian. For clarification, we have to take the service animal on the ambulance with us if they answer yes to the two questions.
Largely, yes, and I'll get into some scenarios that I'll kind of show you here in a couple of minutes, some of the times um where maybe you don't have to, or maybe there's not even a maybe. There's sometimes where you absolutely don't have to. And I'll get into those in a moment. And I do appreciate that's a great question. But to be quite honest with you, in most cases, the answer is going to be yes. It should be the exception. The service animal does not go in the ambulance rather than being the norm. Um, so that's a great question. Um, Access and why does it matter? So what access is it simply means that you have the ability to enter a building, receive goods and services. I'll take that a step farther. What it really means is you can enter a building or get a service from any entity, um, and really be treated just like everyone else. I mean, without harassment, without discrimination, and so on and so forth. Um, Service animal access is granted through the law, and denying access to service animals is discrimination, except for in the cases that I'll show you here momentarily. So access can be denied sometimes. And this is one where if this happens and access is denied, it should be documented. That would be a best practice for the entity. It may not be something that necessarily needs to be in the patient care report, but maybe there's a separate incident report or what have you. But it's something that should be documented. And this really would go for it wouldn't matter if you owned a bakery versus if you're an ambulance service or hospital or what have you. So the big one is the dog is out of control of the handler, is out of control, and the handler does not take effective action to control it. Um, the dog is not housebroken. Um, the ADA generally recognizes that service animals have access to hospitals. However, operating rooms and burn units are recognized as being sterile environments, and service animals can be denied access to these areas, but must be permitted in all other areas that the general public is allowed to go. So an example of that might be, let's just say, for example, that you have a patient receiving room or something like that, or an area where people come in for a medical procedure and then maybe they go to the operating room, but the family generally stays in this one room, or they're allowed to interact with the patient before and after, or what have you. That's not an operating room. And so therefore there's no ADA. What I'm trying to say is there might be instances where they wouldn't be permitted, but by and large, the ADA does not recognize it as just being a blanket, if you will. Um, so what is out of control? So obviously, one of them is Fido's taken off and the handler's going with. Um, Obviously, any signs of aggression. I mean, a dog that's aggressive is not behaving appropriately. They still might be a service dog. Um, but in that moment in time, they've got some behavior issue, and who knows what's causing it. I mean, dogs are just like people. They have bad days too. But nonetheless, we don't have to take, and really we shouldn't take a dog that's actively showing aggression. Dogs that are barking and lunging at other or patrons, that's not acceptable behavior. And if the handler cannot control the dog, then, you know, we absolutely should not take the dog. Um, and posing a direct threat. And so, like, for example, this picture of this dog with his teeth showing, that is a dog proposing a direct threat. A direct threat would not be something like, say, for example, the service dog might bite someone or might do something. That's not considered a direct threat. So another big one that comes up as questions is allergies and fear of dogs. So allergies and fear of dogs are not valid reasons for denying access or refusing service to people using service animals. So this one is really, it's really pretty cut and dry, but by and large, let's just say, for example, that um, you're any town ambulance service and you respond to a call and one of your providers is allergic to dogs. That would not be a reason to bar access or to say, well, we're not taking the service dog because the provider's allergic to dogs. The same thing goes with being afraid of dogs. Now, where that could play in a little bit is, let's say you get to the hospital with this service animal, and let's say that someone there in the emergency department, usually a patient, actually has a severe allergy that is beyond the I get a runny nose, I get itchy eyes, but let's just say they have some extreme, like anaphylactic type reaction to that. Rather than barring access to the service animal to the entirety of the emergency department, the ADA would say, well, then you need to make some kind of an accommodation where you're taking care of the both of them. And that might mean that one patient is placed at one and, in a room at one end of the hall, and the other patient is placed in a room at the other, at a different end. It could even be, well, one patient's taken care of on the second floor and the other patient's taken care of on the first floor. However, the nice thing is, um, part of why dogs are used is that by and large, the people that have allergies to them, they're not extreme allergies. They're just considered minor symptoms, like stuffy nose, runny eyes, things like that. It's not something that's going to cause immediate life threats or peril in most cases. Here's another one where it gets to be somewhat, I won't say tricky, but it can be a little bit something that we just need to consider. So let's just say, for example, in this case, let's just say that this young lady, you come up and you see what's obviously a service animal because it's well behaved. It looks like it might be doing task work. Maybe, and a lot of times service animal handlers do put vests and capes on their dogs. And the reason is mostly is we're telling the rest of the public, like, hey, this is not a pet, leave us alone. Um, we're, we're just here doing our business. This is a medical device. Um, but if we have a patient that's unconscious, now the ADA does say that the handler must be in control of the animal at all times. So if we get down to the nitty gritty, if this young lady were the service animal handler and she's unconscious, then she can't be in control of the animal. And therefore we're not required to take the animal with us to the hospital. where we get into a little bit of a, what I want to say is we have to apply a good level of clinical judgment because, for example, let's say that we have every reason to believe maybe this young lady is hypoglycemic, and therefore we're going to give her some dextrose and she's going to wake up. And even if we still transport her to the hospital, she'll be able to control the service animal. The same thing might also be true if we think maybe this young lady had a seizure and this is going to be a temporary state of unconsciousness when she comes out of it, that service dog is going to be integral in her kind of returning to her baseline. And so that would be a time where we'd want to really weigh out, like, is the service animal hurting anything right now? Do they act like they're behaving? Are they causing some sort of an obstruction where we cannot care for the patient um, with any kind of, like, or, in essence, are they preventing us from getting vital signs? Are they preventing us from getting an assessment? Things like that. So we need to be somewhat cognizant of that. Um, so I'll also throw in, if we don't take the service animal, then it's only great customer service that we have another unit come that takes it. We have a police officer take custody. We have animal control. We have something happen with this dog to where we have, a trustworthy source that's taking care of this animal until the patient is discharged from the hospital. Um, Something to note is, like I said, most insurance companies don't pay for anything to do with service animals. The options to get one is either a person trains their own, which requires a lot of time, or they go through a nonprofit, which may have a waiting list of 2 to 5 years to get a service animal. Or they might go to a private trainer and pay to have one trained, and those price tags can easily reach 15 to $20,000, and in some cases that's the starting point. So they're very expensive medical devices. They're not something like you can't just go into the local drugstore and buy a new one, so to speak. It's not like buying a cane or a crutch in that aspect. So when we're educating our students as well as ourselves on how, we're going to take this service animal with us, what do we do if we get to the emergency department and the emergency department denies access? So the biggest thing is stay calm, educate the staff that they must take the service animal. And if you kind of reference it in, hey, this is a service animal, it's protected by the Americans, it's granted access through the Americans with Disabilities Act, rather than just saying, well, you must do this, you're kind of laying out a framework that says, hey, I want to communicate about this. And just FYI, like, this is real. There's a law here. Contact your supervisor, follow your services protocol for filing an EMTALA or violation or complaint. And that's really important that your service follow up. If there's a denial of access at the emergency department, that's a huge deal. And it's important that all politics, all that stuff aside, that it be reported so that it can be dealt with in the proper manner. Um, consider transport to another facility, and write an excellent report with names, times, as much detail as is humanly possible. Who was there? Who witnessed this? What were the patient's reactions? So on and so forth. Don't offer arrangements for the service dog like a vet, shelter, rescue, etc. And what I mean by that is, um, like, just say I were the patient, you transport me to the hospital. Say I'm at a conference, I'm out of town and I'm in your town, and you take me to your hospital. And if you're like, hey, I'm so sorry, they're not going to take your service dog, it's okay. We're going to take good care of your dog. We're going to take it and we're going to put it here, or take it to the shelter. We're going to do whatever. Those are all nice things, but what you're actually doing is you're actually enabling or placating the entity that is doing discrimination, and you're kind of saying, well, there's no other options for you. This is just what we have to do. So the biggest thing is we can't allow it to keep happening. And so education is really how we, that's a great first step to get ourselves to a space where we know what we're doing with these. Um, what about the fakes? So this is also a problem. Um, Sorry guys, my mind's going about 100 miles an hour because I'm actually doing some research and things on this. Um, Here's what I've encountered, and comes from my own personal experience, and this is also something that I actually got a research project going on where I'm interviewing other service animal handlers and things, and we're kind of, this is a discussion topic in the community right now. So what's really interesting is that in most cases, from my research, what I'm finding out is, and this is not isolated to just me or just one part of the country, by and large, service animal handlers absolutely do not trust EMS. And what we don't trust EMS about is we don't have the faith that if we call that we're going to be taken to the hospital with our service animal. Um, Unfortunately, there's been enough of a track record over the years, and a lot of these you don't find on the news because if you think about it, if this happened to you, it's a lot of effort to go to the news. It's a lot of effort to file a complaint. Like it's a lot, like the burden is all on us. And so a lot of times people with disabilities, you know, I mean, they're just like, whatever, let me just go through my day. I have better things to do than constantly haggling about this issue. Um, but this is such a large problem that most of the guide dog agencies in the United States actually teach their clients not to call ambulances. And that comes from a past experience of most of their clients having called ambulances, and things happen to the extent that like crews get out and see them that they have a dog and then just get back in their rig and leave with no waiver, no assessment, no nothing, just get in their rig and leave. um the other one is that healthcare facilities are like rank as one of the top, that we hate going to healthcare facilities because we expect to run into staff that are not trained about service animals and to be subjected to whatever might get thrown at us. And it's really out of a place of complete ignorance. And then if we do assert our rights, then we're always told about, well, but some people, or well, this one time where there was a fake. And really, I don't know how to frame this any nicer. The fakes are not justification to discriminate against people with legitimate service animals. What entities can do and what we can do to teach our students is to teach them how to determine fake versus real with the two questions the ADA allows, and then to not allow allow the animals that do not meet the legal definition. Meaning, if you ask a handler, is this a service animal required to mitigate a disability? And they're like, you can't ask me that. I'm not going to answer you, whatever. It doesn't matter how legitimate that dog is. They didn't answer the questions. So don't take them. Um, at the same time, not training our people about the difference between an emotional support animal and a service animal puts the actual service animal users in it just makes it more difficult because emotional support animals don't have universally levels of training, and so they may or may not behave well in public. And so then if say that we go to such and such healthcare facility, it's the staff's first time dealing with a service animal, but it's actually an emotional support animal, and the thing goes in there and acts like a fool. Then when we come along with legitimate service animals, they're carrying this past experience with them that is absolutely not even relevant to the situation at hand today. Um, in some states do have penalties for faking service animals. Um, and in all states, if the dog is out of control, it can be removed from the premises. And those of us with service animals really would be tickled pink if when like we like it when entities remove animals whether they're service animals or cloaked as a service animal. But if the animal's out of control, we love it when the entities step in and have them taken out off of the premises. So in short, if it's not behaving, if it's interfering with your treatment and assessment, not simply because it's there, but because, like, say you go to take my blood pressure and my service dog is constantly growling at you, those are reasons you don't have to take the service animal.
All right, we have two questions, Rob.
Sure
Um,
thing.
First is, why are miniature horses the only approved animal other than dogs?
That's a great question, to which I can say I honestly don't know. I think part of it would be is just the animal having the capacity to do work or tasks that mitigate the disability. Um, I've seen things over the years, like I want to say about 20 or 30 years ago, I came across something about somebody that was a quadriplegic and had a monkey. Um, but I'm not enough of a animal behavior expert to know why specifically that, like, a monkey wouldn't be appropriate for someone with for example, like a quadriplegic, because a monkey has opposing thumbs. Animals like, say, for example, a cat, a peacock, an alligator, obviously those animals don't have the capacity to do actual task work in the same way that a dog does.
Right, and the next question is, how do we transport the animal best in the ambulance? And what if the dog is injured on EMS arrival on scene?
Ah, boy, those are great questions. So the biggest thing about transporting them in the ambulance is talk to the handler. So sometimes people and entities mean really well, and they say, well, we're concerned about the safety of your service dog, so therefore you must do, XYZ. They mean well, but what they're actually saying is we don't trust you to know how to take care of your service animal, so we're going to tell you how to do it. So think of it a lot like, if you have children at home, like, no parent wants somebody else telling them how to raise their own kids. It's kind of the same way. Um, but it actually kind of, what you're saying is, well, you have a disability, so you don't have the ability to differentiate these things. So the biggest thing I'm going to say is communication solves just about everything. And having communication in a dialogue where everyone is truly heard is probably the best way. Um, and in most cases, just ask the handler. They know what the dog is capable of. They know what they'll do. Quite frankly, if I was sitting at my desk and I called an ambulance and I'm having an MI, for example, and EMS comes and they say, hey, how would we, how's the best way to transport this dog? In that case, I would say, well, hey, I'm having an MI. You probably don't need access to my feet very much right now. So how about I just have Carnes he'll lay on my legs on the stretcher, and you can take the seatbelt from the stretcher and you can run it through his vest. And they'd be like, oh, okay, fine. And they might ask, well, hey, will you have a problem with us starting IVs, doing blood pressure, so on and so forth? To which I would say, no, you have no problem at all with that. I know him. And if he's in that spot, then he knows that his life is good. He'll watch what you're doing, and he'll always be in tune with me. But he'll know, like, hey, he's right where he wants to be. In some cases, you may need to separate the handler from the service dog, but I would really keep those down to the exception and not the rule. And I would always have the service animal handlers input and involvement in that process. Were there any other questions, Rio?
Not at this time. Nope.
Okay. So do service animal access issues happen? So from this, I'm putting in my own experiences. What I'm going to say is my family and I do it. So one thing I love about education is I have the summers off. And so my family and I, we travel from one end of the country to the other. So these experiences are not isolated to one state, one locality, or even one region. We literally have traveled from one end of the United States to the other and kind of everywhere in between. So here's what I've experienced. since I was first placed with a service animal in 2017. Actually, since 2018. I've only been denied access to a private business 2 times, which is interesting. Which is interesting. In many cases, access issues are quickly, and in every case with those, it was quickly mitigated. It was simply a case where they just didn't know. And one example I can think of was a small little mom and pop laundromat in a small town. I had been out camping and fishing and needed to come in and do my laundry. And the gentleman that owned it's like, hey, we really don't let dogs in here, which I get it. It's a laundromat, right? I mean, nobody wants to have their clean clothes get filthy. And my dog was clean too. And I said, hey, I understand. I said, I get it. It's a small town. You probably never seen a service dog. I said, but before you make a decision, would you do me a favor? And he said, well, it depends on what it is. I said, if I gave you a website and it just had one page you had to read, would you go look at that? And he said, sure, I'll do that. And so I give him the ADA.com website or .gov website. He goes in and looks and he comes out and he's like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. And in private businesses, most of the time, that's how that works, especially in small businesses. But the other 12 times that I've had issue with access being denied, 5 of them have been by municipal government entities, like for example, being on a public beach that has a no dogs policy, and I'm there with my service dog. Well, part of the deal is I don't really want my service dog working in an environment where they're surrounded by pets that are not trained and a distraction to him. And so we intentionally go to places that don't allow dogs, and that's why we go. Um, but 5 have been municipal government entities. One of them was a membership organization, which absolutely has that right. One, a religious organization. They're absolutely exempt from the ADA in the law. And the other 5 have been healthcare facilities. So just take a note there and just look at the math. But you can see that like the worst places to go is healthcare and publicly owned facilities, municipal, state government entities. And really it boils down to that the staff are just absolutely not trained. Um, so access pitfalls. So many service animal handlers have negative interactions with healthcare and EMS settings. Like I said, most guide dog agencies and organizations are teaching their people, like, don't even call an ambulance unless it's absolutely a last resort. One of the most memorable things that I'm putting in my research is I interviewed a man that he's been with a guide dog for 35 years. He's lived I think in about 18 states since he's had a guide dog. He's worked in professional roles, and the man's very well educated. He's got 3 master's degrees. He's sat on boards for guide dog agencies. I mean, if you name it, this guy's done it. He's worked on Wall Street. He's done all kinds of, he's just had a very interesting career in life. But I asked him one time, I said, how many times is an ambulance? Like, have you ever had a problem with an ambulance? And he's like, oh yeah, all the time. And his disabilities require him to call EMS more frequently than what mine do. And I said, well, do you have a number, like an idea? And he said, I quit counting at 25 times that I was denied access. So we really need to, like, this is a trend we can easily change with just simple education. Um, like I said, EMS providers and healthcare professionals receive little to no training on this issue. And what's most ironic, I love ironies in history. I just love ironies in general because they're just fun. But what's so ironic about service animal access surrounding EMS and healthcare is service animals are prescribed by healthcare, but yet that's one of the biggest places we run into issues. And so it's just one of those things that happens, but it just doesn't quite add up. Um, so something I put in here is this old quote from John F. Kennedy. The power of one, like one person can make a tremendous difference with this. And if you think about it, from those of you that are on this webinar that have ever done first response, think about a call that you were on where, the whole trajectory of the call and the way it was handled, happened because one person saw something that nobody else saw, or one person spoke up, and you look back on it and you're like, boy, I'm so glad so and so saw that or brought that to our attention. So you truly can make a difference. Read up on service animals at ada.gov. Memorize the two questions you can ask or place them on a small card and carry them with you. Never be afraid to ask the two questions. It shows your patient with a service animal that you care, and don't make a policy that all dogs can ride. It's disrespectful to service animal teams. It's to be honest, it's kind of the lazy way out. Instead of saying, well, we're going to educate our people on the ins and outs of this. It's like saying, okay, now we'll just let them all, and the dogs get to go everywhere. It's just disrespectful. And just remember, it's only two questions, so it's it's not too hard. Um, Curriculum development. So like, how do we do this? Like, how do we train our people? How do we teach our students? So, like I said before in the beginning, service animal users have the same exact reasons they would call EMS as what any other patient would. So I would recommend that you simply just design it, you place it in your curriculum right alongside everything else. Don't make it this own little, hey, there's this special circumstance that lives way over here, and we're only going to talk about it, for 5 minutes during your whole paramedic program or EMT course or whatever, and embed it and sprinkle it in and come up with some scenarios where like, hey, this is a no-brainer. The dog should go with. Put in some scenarios where it's a no-brainer, the dog should not go with, right? And I'm sorry I didn't answer the question about the injured service animal earlier, but if the service animal is injured and the animal's posing a threat to other people, because sometimes injured dogs can do some strange stuff, we have to remember we're there to take care of the people first. And so we really have to focus our energy in that area. Um, Once again, if your patient's alert and oriented, get their input, see what they want to, by all means, make them part of the decision-making phase of this as much as you can. Otherwise, if it's car accident, your patient's got life-threatening injuries, by all means, take care of your patient. If you somehow think, hey, we got an injured dog here and I see a service dog vest on the floorboard of the car, tell one of the police officers or firefighters or somebody else in your organization about it, so that, maybe, it'd be great customer service if you somehow got the animal to a vet or something like that. That would be great. But just remember, we're mainly there for the people. Um, but when the people can be part of the decision, they really should be. Um, and then the other one is seek outside assistance if you need help. So on the end of this is my contact information. You always call me. Be very happy to help you. Um, but otherwise, other places you can go. Seek out service animal trainers and organizations in your own locality. Having service animals in your lab simulations is great training for the dogs and for the students. I've actually called a few organizations. I've spoken to some service dog trainers and said, hey, if XYZ fire department or XYZ EMS service or such and such college or whatever, if they were doing this education for their people, their students, would you guys, like, what would your reaction to that be? And universally, they're all like, oh my gosh, we would be delighted. That would be so amazing. Because, they want their clients to have great experiences and have, the whole purpose of having a service dog or a service, a miniature horse. It's all about mobility, the ability to move through society and be able to function at the same level everybody, or is, at the highest level of functioning you can have. So having them be part of your training, part of your, scenario work, whatever, it's outstanding training for the dogs, and it's also extremely good PR. And it really sends a message to the service animal community like, hey, we care. Put that on the news, because believe it or not, those of us with service animals, when we travel, like, hey, I'm going to go to Anytown, USA. Let me Google Anytown, USA service dog problems. And if I see flash up stuff like news headlines, service animal problems with EMS, service animal problems with the public bus system, service animal problems with whatever organization, I keep that in the back of my head. And actually, there's times that I'm like, you know what? I don't have to go to any town. I'm going to go somewhere else. So put that kind of stuff out there, get it out in the front because the service animal community will be watching. And and by having these people come to your scenario work and stuff, it's a great time for these interactions to happen in a no risk, in a low risk environment. And it yeah, it's just amazing. If you do that, please send me pictures. I would love to have pictures. It would tell me that the work that I'm doing, that it's working and that we're getting the word out and it's making an impact. Um, Other resources, service dog accreditation and agencies. I believe there's one, like two of them. Assistance Dogs International, National Disability Rights Network, area nonprofit service dog providers, animal shelters, rescues, and dog trainers and breeders. So animal shelters and rescues usually have dog trainers on their contact list, or they have a lot of contacts with dog trainers. And within those, there's a lot of contacts. Like you never know who somebody's going to know. They might even have some service dog trainers on their contact list, or their trainer does, so on and so forth. So they can help you make connections. So even if you're in a small town, don't think, hey, like, hey, we're only a town of 200 people. We don't have this around. Reach out because it might be a lot closer than you think. Any other questions or comments?
Um, Robert did ask if you had developed a standardized curriculum that other EMS educators could add to their programs because he could not imagine anyone else doing a better job.
Oh, well, thank you for that huge compliment. I really do. Um, I haven't come up with a standard one yet, but on the next slide, I have my email. I actually have posted my University of Nebraska email just because that's kind of where I'm doing research and stuff on this from. Please reach out to me. Here I've got my references. Let me go one more page. Please reach out to me at this email address. Give me a little bit of context, like, how big of a, who is the student? Are these brand new students? Are these experienced providers, so on and so forth. And I'd be happy to work with you to come up with something that'd be really workable for your situation. And thank you for the compliment. But to be honest, this is one of those topics, guys, that had I been a paramedic in the field and encountered a service dog on a call, I probably would have been the bad guy that went viral on YouTube and TikTok and everything else because I have no, I probably would have done the absolute wrong thing. So this is about just letting good people know, like, hey, this is what we have to do, and this is how it works. And once we do that, the next step is say, okay, well, now we got to make sure that when we do it, we're coming across the people in such a way that we're truly as welcoming to them as we are to somebody else, that we're not giving them the evil glare and stare and stuff like that. But hey, that's step two. For now, let's focus on step one. Are there any other questions or comments, Rio?
I don't see any other questions. No, looks like we covered them all.
Great. Well, Robert or anybody else, please reach out to me at that email. I would be more than happy to to help you out the best that I can. Um, and I don't have an exact timeline on a standardized curriculum, but that's the direction that we're headed, and I certainly hope that we're able to get that done sooner than later. So thank you all for being in attendance. It's in this case, the people that are here, I'm kind of preaching to the choir, but please go share this. Like that's the biggest thing is just share it with somebody else because when we know better, we do better.